Since 2014, Guardians have been killing big bad after big bad in the Destiny universe. And in that 8-year time span, we have seen our fair share of boss encounters, divided between raids, dungeons, strikes, and more. But which of these big bad bosses have been the toughest, the hardest, the nastiest bosses for Guardians to overcome? Well, that's a question I recently asked the community, and I was amazed at the responses to this question. So after compiling all of your responses, I put together a poll of the top 5 toughest bosses in Destiny's history, and I asked you, the community, to vote which is the toughest. So today we will be discovering which Destiny boss takes the crown as the toughest and hardest boss in all of Destiny. Before we begin, if you enjoy the video and want to see more ranking videos like this one, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. So what determines the toughest boss when it comes to Destiny's franchise? Does a boss encounter have to have a series of elaborate puzzles and mechanics, time restrictions, or just an insurmountable amount of health to overcome in order to constitute being the toughest boss? Maybe it's a mix of all of these. Maybe it's not as clear-cut of an answer, which is why I went to you, the community, and I was shocked at the responses to this question. So with that being said, let's dive into the top 5 bosses of all time. Coming in at number 5 with 4% of the votes is Axis, the Archon Prime, the final raid boss in the Wrath of the Machine raid, released in 2016 with the Rise of Iron DLC. This raid introduced Guardians to a new Siva-infused Fallen army, with its figurehead, Axis, taking the reign as its final boss battle. This encounter is broken up into 2 phases, both phases involving use of Scorch Cannons to kill captains, followed by servitors in a correct elemental pattern to destroy nodes and to obtain charges that you'll use to stun Axis. This then transitions into Axis's actual damage phase, which gets initiated after empowered Guardians shoot a crit spot on Axis's back. And from there, it's all about precision damage until the big Siva boy is down. This encounter requires a heavy amount of communication between broken up teams, which are divided across an enclosed map, which is a fairly common practice for raids in Destiny, but it requires extreme focus and concentration to avoid death and to communicate, along with dishing out a ton of DPS in a short amount of time. And because of those obstacles, Axis, the Archon Prime, ranks in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, the apparent fan favorite, taking up 8% of the votes, Oryx, the Taken King himself. Originally introduced in the Taken King expansion, Oryx has been one of those bosses that you just can't keep dead. Something Guardians will soon discover once more when the King's Fall raid is reintroduced into Destiny 2. But for now, we are referring to the original King's Fall raid within Destiny 1. And boy, I can attest to the endless hours spent in this raid, and specifically with Oryx. Invisible platforms, exploding blights, taken ogres, multiple wipe mechanics, an absolute onslaught of intensity that downright broke many Guardians time and time again. But even though all of its adversities, the King's Fall raid remains to be one of the most popular raids in all of Destiny, and the big guy Oryx takes the number 4 spot of toughest bosses in Destiny's history. So who will round out the top 3? Well, none other than the Kell of Kells himself, Skolas. Skolas found himself as the lead boss in the Prison of Elders 3-man activity, which was introduced with the House of Wolves expansion, and it was rightfully so. This encounter posed to be a challenge for many Guardians, especially those who lacked the Gallarhorn. Skolas' encounter posed some interesting mechanics, including capturing zones, scaving off adds, and taking on the big guy himself, who had a massive amount of health. doing this all while you are being debuffed. It required mastery skills, finely tuned loadouts, and massive damage output in a very quick time. To boot, this was all at a time where Guardians relied on heavy ammo synthesizers, which was not fun at all. And because of all of these obstacles, the community has concisely ranked Skolas as the third toughest boss in Destiny's history with 9% of the votes. So how many of you watching would bet that a strike boss would make its way all the way to number 2 on the toughest bosses list? Well, you might be shocked then, because the Transcendent Mind from the Glassway strike on Europa comes in at number 2. To be clear, specifically the Grand Master edition of the Transcendent Mind boss encounter. This one comes in at number 2, and for any who have completed this Grandmaster version of the Glassway, you know the feeling that runs up your back when you see that this is on rotation this season as a Grandmaster. Waves of wyverns, hydras, hobgoblins, and massively tanky champion minotaurs stand between you and the Transcendent Mind in this 3-phase boss encounter, with extreme death limitations and the risk of being sent back to orbit. The arena is filled with small, confined spaces that can quickly enclose around you, requiring you to push the boundaries of your own survivability while fighting off this horrendous army of Vex. And that's why, with 15% of the votes, the Transcendent Mind on Grandmaster difficulty comes in as the second toughest boss in Destiny's history. And so we have made it to the reveal of the toughest boss in all of Destiny's history. The one boss encounter that teeters that line between what's possible and what's not, what's real and what's deception. And that is Riven of 1,000 Voices, the final boss in the Last Wish raid, introduced in Destiny 2 with the Forsaken DLC. And for the sake of argument, we are exclusively referring to the Riven encounter without any cheeses, which is an accomplishment that many Guardians, even those carrying the Wish No More emblem, have never overcome. Riven's encounter consists of 3 phases spread out across multiple arenas, including ones that take place on the Ascendant Plane. Guardians are split up in different segments of these phases, and will find themselves going from ad clearing, to boss damage, to jumping puzzles, and then relay races, all in a very quick time frame, meaning that every movement has to be predetermined and precise. It requires constant communication and a high level of skill to overcome this boss encounter as it was intended to be done. And because of its pure brutal nature and extreme difficulty, it has been unanimously voted as the toughest boss in Destiny's history with an astounding 65% of the votes. So I ask you again, what determines the toughest boss in Destiny? Is it a series of elaborate puzzles and mechanics, time restrictions, or just an insurmountable amount of health? Or maybe just a mix of all? That's exactly what Bungie gave us with the Riven of 1,000 Voices, but where does Riven rank on your list of toughest bosses in Destiny? Let me know how you feel about these rankings in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If so, be sure to hit that like button below, and if you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well. If you'd like to join in on exclusive members-only live streams and content, be sure to become a member of the Profane community below. And if you're new to Destiny and looking for help or just other Guardians to play with, be sure to check out the Discord link in the description below to join the Agents of Artifice Discord and Clan. That's going to wrap things up for today's video, but until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane wishing you all some happy hunting.